G'day legends, Blake here with another video, and have you ever wondered how often you need to maintain a sponge filter for? They're not like other filters that slow down and flow, so how do you know when it's time? Let's jump straight into the video. Okay, so to get started, what sort of authority do I have on this topic? I'm not coming from a biological standpoint. I haven't got my microscope out and tested all the different bacterium and stuff like that that are in the water, but what I do have is about 80 sponge filters in action right now, some of which have been in action for probably 2 to 3 years without ever being cleaned, and I've got a whole bunch of tanks, some that are successful, some that are not so successful, so we're gonna use that sort of fish room knowledge today. Maintaining a sponge filter is really easy. If you've never seen one, I don't know how you found this video, but this is a sponge filter. There's not too much to it. You've got an uplift tube here, optional depending on how much flow you want going through the thing. You've got a top cap here, that's where your airline connects to. Then you have a bottom as well, which is just weighting it down. And you have a middle part, which wasn't supposed to stay on, but this is where the water comes through. And then of course you got sponge. Basically, this is just gonna have water flow through it and collect some debris before that water goes back out. Very, very simple. Think about like a sieve or anything like that that you might use to drain your vegetables or rice or whatever. So to maintain it, pretty easy. Usually you'll make a huge mess. So as you're doing a water change, keep some of that in a bucket. 2-3 buckets is even better. And then take the airline off the top, lift this as carefully as you can. Some people scoop a plastic bag under it, but personally I find that pretty tedious, so I don't do that. So then take this part off and you squeeze this in that bucket of tank water. Reason I say 2 or 3 is squeeze it a bunch in the first one, and then that water's gonna get filthy. Move it to the second one, squeeze it a bunch, that water's gonna get slightly less filthy. Third, it should, in theory, be better. And then you'll put it back in the tank. And when you do, and you reconnect the air up and it's all back together, don't be alarmed. It's gonna spurt out some brown gravy out the top, and it's gonna make your tank look a mess for about the next 20 minutes. So don't do that 5 seconds before a big party, because your tank is gonna look bad, but eventually it'll pick it up again and all good. So that's the simplest, quickest rundown of how you can do this. So the first thing to ask is, what porosity is your sponge filter? Or if you haven't picked one up yet, choose a porosity that is going to suit your maintenance requirements. Probably the most famous sponge filters in existence, and I've got a really dirty one here, so prepare yourself, is the Aquarium Co-op sponge filter. Now, as you can see, really high porosity. That means a low pores per square inch number. So you might see P, whatever that is, PPI. You might see that number, and the lower you get, the larger the holes are gonna be. The higher you get, the more fine it's gonna be. Difference being is that this one, your tank might have a few little particles in the water, but you might be okay with that. It's not gonna clog up really ever. Whereas with the fine one, for the first few weeks or the first month or so that you put it in, or after you do maintenance, your tank is gonna be looking crystal clear. It's gonna be looking like you're running 50 kilos of carbon in there. But the thing is that won't last too long, and eventually you'll find some debris. You'll have to maintain it a bit more regularly. So figure out how often you think you wanna go through the tedium of squeezing out a sponge filter. Half that number, because life happens sometimes, and then select the porosity that you wish to get based on that, if you haven't already bought your sponge filters already. If you have, and you're finding that it's not keeping up with how regularly you want to do it, add another one in. There's no reason you can't have a fine porosity and a coarse porosity, or 2 fines or 2 coarse. It doesn't really matter. It all does the same thing eventually. Does it matter which one you choose in terms of its ability to harbor bacteria? In my experience, no. You can definitely keep fish alive with this. You can definitely keep fish alive with this. And in terms of that, I don't think it really matters. I think realistically, there's way more surface area on both of these things than you're ever gonna need to grow bacteria on. The other thing that's going to really depend on is what kind of fish are you keeping. Are you going to keep things that are likely to keep going at the food, like platies and guppies, where once the food hits the bottom of the tank, it's still fair game and it's still likely to get eaten and broken down? Or are you going to keep things like goldfish and Oscars where they're really going to be messy eaters and have large excretions and stuff like that, where that's just going to cause a lot of debris to have to work through for a little filter. So depending on what you're going to stock it with and how heavy that is, which is also going to rely on the food that you feed. Some foods obviously feed a lot cleaner than others. Things like gel food and food that you crush with your fingers are going to be a lot more fine for that sponge filter to try and catch than more complete foods that are going to be a lot larger. So keep that in mind. But let's just say you've got sort of a normal community tank, you've chosen a porosity and you've just kind of let it go. How do you know when it's time to maintain it? Because kind of the double-edged sword of sponge filters is that the flow doesn't seem to slow down like it would in a hang-on back or a canister filter, where you really know that it's time to maintain it because, well, in some cases a hang-on back has overflowed and caused a flood in your house, or a canister filter is basically dribbling out nothing and not being very effective. So how do you know when it's time to clean a sponge filter? Well, the good news is that I think there's a very easily visible way to know this, but you're looking in the wrong area. It's not to do with the flow per se, but it's more to do with the debris. Have you noticed that your tank has gotten visibly dirtier? Have you noticed excessive algae that's starting to come as a result of the extra nutrients that are around as a result of the sponge having so many nutrients inside it? Or, you know, are you just noticing an excessive amount of, you know, extra muck and debris? Did I kind of cover that in the first point? If I did, then so be it. Sponge filters will stay the same, meaning that they'll still filter the water, they'll still keep the fish alive, and they'll still provide oxygen as well, no matter how long they are being used for, or no matter how clogged up they are. But the difference is going to be just how much particulates are in the water column, how much debris might be on the bottom of the tank, and so forth. So if you're willing to put up with a lot, then you could be like me and you could leave some of your sponge filters for years on end. One of the things I really love about sponge filters is that, like if you have a hang-on back filter, for example, that clogs up, that might even mean a flood in your house. So it becomes pretty risky, but sponge filters are going to be sponge filters no matter what. So yeah, they can really put up with a lot. And in fact, some of my sponge filters, let's see if I've got some examples here, maybe, they actually end up having devil's ivy or pothos roots growing into them, which is kind of annoying. So that becomes basically a permanent fixture now. So, you know, even if I was able to pull that out, the middle of that is really just all covered in roots now. So that's why I just go ahead and add another sponge filter in, and then I never have to maintain that one ever again. But there you have it. Hopefully that didn't confuse things further. But I guess in summary, the Holy Grail answer is that you can maintain sponge filters as often or as not often as you like. And all that it's going to matter is the visual impact of your aquarium. Your fish are going to be perfectly fine. And that's why I think sponge filters are a fantastic filter. If you got any more questions, please let me know down below. Otherwise, if you don't have any questions, just type down below that fish keeping rules, and that will make me smile too. So if you did like the video, it always helps me to smash like, hit subscribe, and all that fun stuff. And I'll drop another video there. If you do like this content, please watch another one. Thanks for watching. Catch you on the next one.